Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, the post-China, post-Davos episode. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our guest on this episode is Deleo de Leonardis, CEO and co-founder of Purity IQ. Purity IQ helps companies protect and strengthen their products through science-based authenticity testing and certification based in Guelph, a place you're very familiar with, Sylvain.
Yeah, absolutely.
They partner lots of partners across the supply chain to make authenticity a competitive advantage. She takes authenticity to a whole new level. It was a fascinating interview. I met Deleo at the last Cial event, but you've probably known her for longer.
Absolutely, yeah. We geeked out in terms of food fraud with Deleo. I mean, it was just a great conversation and so knowledgeable. And food fraud is a problem we don't necessarily think about all that much as consumers, but it is a problem. And I think they have the right approach to deal with food fraud. And more companies are really asking more questions to the suppliers to make sure that what they're buying is actually labeled correctly. And
it's actually what they're buying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, companies like Walmart and Loblaws and Sobeys and Metro, they don't want to be caught up into this food fraud scandal. So they're being extremely careful and they're asking way more questions. And Deleo's technology can actually help these companies in terms of surveying some of these fraudulent cases.
Yeah, it's pretty slick stuff. All right, well, you just got out, literally just flew in. You were out in the beautiful West in Manitoba. You just flew in and just got on the mic. Tell me where you were and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I was invited to speak at the Manitoba Ag Days, and it is the largest indoor ag fair, I guess, in Canada. It is 12 acres. That place is huge. And I was there for a day and I couldn't tour the whole thing. It was just so big. And so they have two venues where they have conferences, and I was in one of them, and the one I was in basically accommodated maybe 400 people in total. And it was great, and it was a bit of a lecture hall, really, and so I was asked to come in and talk about the future of food, some of the issues that are impacting farmers, processors, whether it's in Manitoba or elsewhere in Canada or around the world. And of course, we did talk about the big elephant in the room, geopolitics, of course. And of course, on Friday, there was this big deal on canola. And for lobster as well. So everyone actually was talking about it. And to be honest, when I was talking to farmers before my talk, it was actually at 1:00. And in the morning, I just walked around the show, and people recognize me and they come and greet me. And I love Manitobans. The Manitobans are just great. But they'll tell you what they think. And they are absolutely ecstatic with the deal with China. They're happy that there's some thawing going on diplomatically with China. I mean, let's face it. When you're in ag, if you have access to a market of 1.2 billion people, you're happy. I mean, there's no other way to see it. And of course, the other issue that came up in some of my conversations was Premier Ford. Yes, your premier. They love him. They adore him.
Yes. Not. Well, let's get.
I can say they're not overly amused by Mr. Ford's political theatrics.
Well, let's start in China. Let's start where we were wrong. You, me, and a lot of other people were wrong. We expected that, perhaps because of a good job managing our expectations, the outcome of this China trip would be just some kind of handshakes and some commitments to work together. But they came out of that with at least a short-term deal to the end of 2026 for many ag products, including canola, lobster, and some other products. A short-term deal.
I was wrong about the meeting, but I about 6 months ago, we did talk about China, if you remember, on this show. And what transpired on Friday is pretty much what I thought should be happening, right?
Yes. Well, you're exactly right. We were wrong about the the trip itself. But
the trip itself,
you were absolutely correct that there'd be a trade-off between EVs, right? 50,000 EVs, which is like 3% of what
as soon as I heard the news, I wrote an op-ed, I think in 2 seconds, because I was very, very happy and thrilled that we have a deal with China. Now, of course, I understand it's a divisive issue right now politically. I think a lot of people are concerned about China, and for strong and valid reasons, of course, with EVs coming to the country and partnering with China, being a dictatorship, a communist country. And I think we get all that in ag and food. I mean, I think everyone understands the risks, but when you actually look at the entire world, partnering with the country will come with some geopolitical risk, no matter who you deal with. No matter who you deal with, really.
Yeah. There's no easy trade-offs. Now, what do you think of this? I was just reading some follow-up post interviews with our ag minister, Heath McDonald, and he was saying, the question was, and I had the same question, why just to the end of 2026, whereas the EV deal is much longer? And I guess it's tied up with aluminum or steel dumping in the country, so there's still some deals to be worked out. We're happy as an ag podcast that the West gets to win one, because they don't often get to win one. So I think it's a good deal for national unity, notwithstanding what Doug Ford is going on about. Are you optimistic that we can continue to grow into the 27 growing season? Because the farmers are going to need to know that this summer, right? They can't bet that it's going to end or continue. They're going to have a pretty good idea by the summer when they're planting, right?
Yeah, crop management, I mean, it spans over 2-3 years. Basically, farmers will commit. So some certainty would be valuable, but let's face it, the farmers are starting to get used to uncertainty and some measures implemented by China because in retaliation to some of our decisions. But I do think that this administration, the current administration, is extremely careful not to make very harsh decisions against China at this point. They'll have an easier job than former Prime Minister Trudeau because, of course, under Prime Minister Trudeau, we had Biden and a good relationship. That's no longer the case. So I think it'll be easier for Prime Minister Carney to really favor that relationship and nurture that relationship with China as much as possible. So I actually do think
they're not holding Canadians hostage at the current moment either. So that
exactly.
makes it
and canola
easier.
was actually invented in Manitoba where I was. And frankly, I would say that people felt very positive about what's going on. Of course, there's some caution, obviously, some cautious optimism overall, but farmers are always like that. So, but I do think that the feeling was generally very, very good. And by the way, I was talking to a Reuters reporter yesterday and gave an interview to Reuters after my talk. And basically, we talked about China's opening up the market to Canadian beef. And that's something that nobody is talking about, but we'll be able to ship more beef to China. Now, it won't impact prices here. We don't have the capacity to support a market like China, but surely it will favor some cuts and it will actually increase margins for some processors in Canada and in the U.S. as well. Obviously, we have a deal with China, and make no mistake, my guess is that some American ranchers, some American processors will take note. So a good sign again for ag in Canada with China.
Well, just follow up on that last point. I mean, the farmers can't feed North America, so how big an opportunity is it? Though I guess you must be thinking, well, then I'll increase the herd even more now because it looks like I'll be able to ship to
that's the thing
China,
about
right?
These deals, right? So if a producer thinks he can actually sell to other markets, then you're more likely to reinvest in your herd. Right now, Brazil, Argentina, those are countries dominating the Chinese market. But you're always a screw worm away from seeing seeing your country as being a problem for China, especially when it comes to food safety. The screw worm doesn't compromise food safety. safety, but we saw what happened with mad cow, right? A lot of people are afraid and concerned, and you can actually see your market access being destroyed overnight. So I actually think that Canada did a pretty good job negotiating a good deal for China for now, but we are expecting some growth over time. I actually had a chance to meet with the Minister of Agriculture in Manitoba yesterday morning for coffee. I was actually supposed to meet the Premier of Manitoba at the same time, Wab Kinew, and I was actually looking forward to meet him because we've been hearing a lot about him in the press.
Sure.
And our lab, I did announce yesterday that we're actually going to be working with the Department of Agriculture in Manitoba on food inflation because there's several measures being implemented in Manitoba to help consumers. And had a great chat with the Minister of Agriculture. Great guy. Certainly, they've had some challenges with the Merit Foods closure. We talked about this on the show a few months ago, but they're actually looking forward. They're looking at the future very positively, and of course, with what's going on with China in general, everyone was very happy, including the minister.
And India, we should throw India in there as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Both are moving in the same direction. Turning our minds to Davos for a few minutes, the speech that everybody's talking about. Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry made a grand entrance into the side stage. Kidding, of course. Trudeau.
Were they there for real?
Yeah, Trudeau's on some side stage saying whatever he's talking about. Anyway.
What?
Yeah.
Do people actually care?
Well, no, he was on a side stage somewhere. A couple of people joined him, but they're there to see Katy Perry, I think, more than Justin Trudeau. Be my perspective. Now, of course, we're talking about the rupture in world order speech.
Prime Minister, take a backstage splash, you'll be tariffed to death. I don't know.
Prime Minister Carney's speech. Now, I searched through that speech. I did see it, and I have watched the transcript. As a speechifying person, like as a person who loves words, it was a fabulous speech. Really, it was a very strong speech. But of course, for this podcast, I actually put it into AI and had AI search the speech for any implications in agriculture, which there were.
Okay.
And he talked about a country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. Strategic autonomy in energy, food, and supply chains ultimately rests on living systems. So that's a big deal, I think, that ag makes it into such an important speech and really lands it center for us. And now my question to you, I don't think you've had the time to see the speech, but okay, he talked about it.
I didn't see it at all. I just saw snippets on X, and that's about it because I've been traveling all week. So and frankly, tomorrow I'm back on the plane going to Quebec City. So I won't have time to digest what was said in Davos or any of the meetings actually in Davos this week. But I heard it was a good speech, and that's great. I mean, it sets the right tone for the new world, right?
Well, let's talk about that to the one step further. Great speech, congratulations. Now what happens? Of course, we should all be asking, what does it mean? So what is it, if you were traveling with the Prime Minister and he said, thanks for including agriculture, what 3 things should he and his people do at the federal level to honor that outcome, to strengthen our agricultural sector? What 3 things need to happen or should happen? You've been calling for many, many things, but if you had an idea, you had his, had his ear for a few minutes, said, okay, you've put ag at the center of a strong nation. Here's 3 things you got to work on. What would those 3 things be?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm very happy that he actually mentioned agriculture and food in that speech because it is attracting a lot of attention, and you want attention given to agri-food. So I'm very happy about that. 3 things, I'd say. 1, focus on manufacturing. Like you got to build more manufacturing plants. You got to really, and I'm looking at many verticals, livestock. You can look at all the processed foods or make basically the food industry in Canada much more relevant, innovative. It's much easier to control, support your farmers to innovate when you control manufacturing. So I certainly would do that. I would implement a strategic revision and implement a fresh roadmap to optimize supply management as soon as possible. It is a barrier between provinces, and it is a barrier for growth. The world wants Canadian dairy. We're always thinking on the defense thinking, well, we don't want American dairy. Well, I actually have not met a Canadian telling me I want more American milk. But people want more of Canada on their plates, and we're going to be short of milk and butter, and so there's tremendous opportunities to grow the agri-food sector even more instead of managing a declining sector with supply management. And so there are ways to keep the quota system while making the sector more relevant. And lastly, of course, I will certainly look at the issue of carbon in general. I do think it's important to focus on green technologies, but I certainly would flip things around and incentivize the sector to adopt green technology instead of taxing them. Taxing a sector with very low margins is just simply a bad idea.
Now, let me circle back on something relevant you said about Manitoba, actually, and you talked to the ag minister. One of my things I wanted to ask you about, there's a bit of a bun fight happening with the cost of milk, and that the government, Wabkanu, is asking the grocers to take the pain of increased costs, decreased margins. What do you think of that? I mean, you're not a big fan of price. I think he's asked them to freeze the price on milk. Did that come up in your conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I did say to the minister that over the short term, it is a populist measure and it probably will help. The problem is that it'll become increasingly difficult to encourage grocers to carry the product. I mean, unless they want a loss leader. And milk can actually be useful if you're looking for a loss leader, but you will discourage retailing. I mean, and you will discourage.
You think retailers would stop carrying milk? I mean, I can't imagine that world.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, basically, if you're not making any money, I suspect that you may actually have a bit of a price for. Who knows? But I would say as soon as you start regulating prices, do expect less supply. That's the bottom line. Because you're discouraging the market to sell that product. You want to be careful. So my guess is that this is more of a pause in Manitoba. We actually are working with the department and on this issue. I don't think Quebec's model is the right one either, because they have a floor and ceiling price, and it's all in the detail. It's all about how you regulate prices. Who gets consulted? And what's the arithmetic behind prices? So you can say regulate prices, but how are you going to do it? Like, how exactly are you going to do it? And so farm gate economics are taken care of by supply management. Farmers will actually make money no matter what happens to retail. But you want consumers to engage with the product as much as possible. So regulating for a while may not be a bad thing, but don't do it forever. It's just not a good idea.
All right. Exactly. Sticking with politics for the last couple of things, very political beginning, but we'll get to some more interesting, or we'll get to some other things after our interview. Premier Legault has resigned in Quebec. Yes. Now, you long respected the Quebec agriculture minister. You thought he was one of the best in the business. What's your, I mean, it's hard now to see the Liberals. It's hard not to see the separatist government coming in the bloc coming into Quebec. What do you know of their policies around food? Any comments?
So right now the Separatist Party, the Parti Québécois, is in the lead. I mean, the big question right now in Quebec is, will the Coalition Avenir Québec, that's Legault's party, will it survive? Because it was created back in 2012. It's a very young party. It's a coalition. There's no true base compared to the Liberals and the Parti Québécois, the Separatist Party. It's seen as a Federalist party, but there are lots of separatists. I mean, Legault himself was a separatist before. And so it's going to be interesting to watch. But the thing about Quebec, man, it's like America. They're always going through an election. Even though an election is every 4 years in Quebec, they always talk about an election. Like, they've been talking about the election since, I'd say, probably 2023, 2024. I mean, it's just ongoing. That's why, like, Pablo Rodriguez, when he went from Ottawa to Quebec, he really realized that Quebec politics are a blood sport. truly a blood sport.
And then he got ran out of the party.
Within weeks, he was a leader for a couple of weeks, and he was a really respected cabinet minister in Ottawa. And so it's tough. It's politics. Like media in Quebec is really, really tough. And so we'll see
any
how
comments
it goes.
on their ag policies? Anything you know of, or is that something we should just kind of start paying more attention to when the time is right?
Well, Quebec is, to me, has always been a very progressive province. What's going to be interesting is how things play out between Quebec and now the separatist movement in Alberta. I mean, so there could be two provinces going at each other, or not going at each other, but going after sovereignty in a way. Both provinces, I don't think, have a shot, not even close. But still, it will put pressure on Ottawa to listen to Quebec. But the other thing that I learned when I was out west this week is you wouldn't believe the number of time I heard from farmers. It's about time Ottawa gives more attention to the West.
Yep.
That came up a lot.
I'd echo that 10x. We've been talking about that since the beginning of this podcast.
And I think Alberta is part of that. I mean, it's putting, so that's why I'm enjoying the separatist movement. I don't want Alberta to separate, but because it's a great province and I want to keep it to make Canada stronger. But I'd say the separatist movement in Alberta is just pushing Ottawa to run a better, stronger country.
Well, speaking of which, let's end this segment with talking about food inflation. So the inflation numbers came out, and they were, as you predicted, shocking numbers.
Actually, they were more inflation. Shocking than predicted.
Well, I know they were.
I was predicting north of 5, and we got north of 6.
And even higher in the restaurant sector. So, is this just simply comping numbers that were suppressed because of the GST holiday, or you think this is, I mean, you've long thought that there's systematic issues that drive food inflation in this country that we're not dealing with, but do you expect that number to go down just because, once you get past the GST break, there's some moderation at least in the percentage?
Well, thanks for asking, because I saw the media coverage, and people were pushing aside the whole issue of the 6.2 because of the GST holiday. But let's be clear here, okay? The 6.2% is not just because of the GST holiday. We actually calculated the impact of the GST holiday on December 2025's rate, okay, the inflation rate. And our estimate is that the actual food inflation rate without the GST holiday, if the GST holiday didn't exist, our food inflation rate would have come in at 4.2%. Okay. Which still would be the second highest among G7 countries. Okay,
so 2 points, basically 2.5 points, thanks to the GST holiday.
So take the 2 points. Okay, we also estimated that 1% of the 2% is the tax itself. Well, you basically got a break of 1% in December, and that's why the number we got this month is skewed. But the other 1% is opportunistic pricing. And we did talk about this last year. I did testify before Senate, warning senators about this. And yes, and this is now we can actually measure the impact of opportunistic pricing. So in other words, companies, retailers, restaurants took advantage of the confusion around taxes. People were just so focused on taxes, they were able to increase prices as the GST holiday was being implemented. And that's why I think that the January numbers will be much, much worse. Much worse, because it's the entire month. In December, we're talking about 17 days.
Right.
So again, the one point that I was trying to make for months now is that bad policy can actually make things worse. And the GST holiday is certainly one good example of that.
All right, well, let's leave that conversation there now, and let's get to our interview with Deleo from Purity IQ, and then we'll be back to wrap up the show.
We have a special guest joining us today on the pod, Deleo de Leonardis, joining us from Purity IQ. Deleo, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sylvain. Michael, nice to be here.
As we do with all guests, we want to know about you, your background, and what do you do at Purity IQ?
Well, interestingly enough, your listeners don't yet know, but Purity IQ is a science-based company, but my background has zero science in it. So that's surprise, surprise. I have been in the food and drug retail business for over 30 years, both in Quebec and in Ontario. I was most recently 20 years with Sobeys, the second largest supermarket chain in Canada, which I'm sure most of your listeners know, in a variety of different senior positions, but most notably for many years as the vice president of private label. So I come at this with an understanding of the industry, an understanding of the importance of protecting your brand and brand integrity, and the real reputational risk that can happen if there's an incident with the product. And that's why I and my co-founder partners, we started Purity IQ. So that's my background, again, retail oriented. And as for what I do at Purity IQ, as I just mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders. There's 4 of us. Mm-hmm. And I'm also, I have the dubious honor of being the CEO.
Purity IQ is very much focused on authenticity testing, food authenticity testing. So explain to us, what is that?
Well, that's a loaded question. It's food, and we do natural health products, dietary supplements as well. So what we do is we are testing products, and we're not just a testing company. We also have certification, but we're testing products to ensure the identity, the purity, and the consistency of the products. And I think that's what differentiates us from a lot of labs that are out there. We don't do anything else, by the way. So although we have a lab, we don't do any other routine testing that most labs would do. So we don't look for heavy metals and pesticides and microbials.
Right.
All we do is authenticity. That's our singular focus. And so, like I said, it's really about not just doing the minimum regulatory compliant testing, which is an identity test, but doing authenticity, which goes much deeper than that. And because this is all we do, we tend to, do deeper dives with our clients. We'll do custom research projects, anything, questions around authenticity that they want answered. And like I said, we also have certification. So it's kind of well-rounded authenticity services.
Now, to test the authenticity of food and food ingredients, what do you actually do with it? Technically?
Well, what we do is we have invested. So I didn't mention to you, my 3 other partners, none of us are scientists, by the way. It's not just that I'm not a scientist. Yes, it gets better and better. We've hired the scientists. So we have, PhDs on staff. They are in our lab in Guelph, day in, day out. But we've also invested in technology that at the time when we started the company, and again, a little naively, we didn't realize this technology wasn't ubiquitous, wasn't on every street corner. It's NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Okay. And, those are words I couldn't even pronounce when we first started the company. But these are really advanced tools that when we were starting the company and speaking to some advisors to understand where we needed to invest, they said, if you're going to be about authenticity and really understanding if a product has been adulterated, because that's why we started Purity IQ, was to try to help combat food fraud. I mentioned at the top that my background, with private label and overseeing a brand, if there's an incident, the potential to lose consumer trust happens instantaneously, even if you've been building that trust over years and decades and 100 years, doesn't matter. It takes one incident and you lose that. So if you're going to be about authenticity, you've got to be able to use technology that isn't just doing the bare minimum, that's going deeper. It's not just a safety and compliance story. It's making sure the product is really authentic. And so the technology that we've invested in, it's not just NMR. We also use DNA-based methods for certain categories. But it helps us bring a deeper visibility into the ingredient integrity And then that enables, our clients to make decisions based on scientific facts, not just assumptions or a piece of paper like a certificate of analysis. This is very advanced technology and has served us well.
Before I throw the baton back to Michael, I just want to ask you a question about consumers in general. Do you think, based on your work at Deleo, do you feel that consumers are, care about food authenticity? Do you know that there are issues in the food industry? We have seen scandals in Europe for sure, and I'm referring to the horse meat scandal. That's probably the biggest one in the Western world, I would say. The Tesco one that erupted, I think it was in 2013. It really affected policy in Europe. In Canada, we've had Mucci Farms, which is probably the biggest one we've had in Canada. Tomatoes, Mexican tomatoes being sold as Canadian, but do you think that consumers actually care about food authenticity in general?
Well, my mother does. As you can imagine. No, yes, consumers do. And I think that the consumers are demanding, I guess it's not necessarily authenticity, but they're demanding transparency. I think everybody knows that. I mean, anything you read these days, demand is growing. And there's all sorts of facts out there about, a very high percentage of consumers are really interested in transparency about the products. Not so much about the company, but the products, and that they really feel that if you're giving them enough detailed information, they will be your consumer for life. But I think that what is starting to dawn on consumers, unfortunately, is that, when you think about it, 10 years ago, we didn't really read labels. I mean, we were reading labels, but we were looking at, fat and calories. Like that was pretty much all we were interested in. But now everybody is really making a conscientious decision to read the label, to look at the ingredient deck, and if it's super big or it's got lots of chemical sounding names, like, you may choose to buy it anyway, but eyes wide open, right? So consumers say, well, I'm making an informed decision. Now they're starting to realize, some of them, because, you said there haven't been a lot of incidents, but anytime, like I think once a month, there's something in the media somewhere. It may not be necessarily Canada, but we have access to media, definitely for US. There's always something going on, olive oil shipments stolen in Italy or Spain or Greece, where you would trust that is authentic. But, full shipments, trucks, warehouses emptied, and then those things are being resold. And you think, oh, yeah, great, it's made in Italy. That's what the label says. But it could have been adulterated now that it was stolen. So consumers now are realizing that they've been reading labels, and that's what's given them a sense of control about making that informed decision. But what if the label is incorrect or intentionally misleading you? Suddenly they realize, like, what's their recourse? They've lost control. And so I think you're right. Consumers assume, especially here in Canada, that if a product is on the shelf, it's safe and compliant. And, in most cases it is. We've got a really great food system. But safety and compliance only tells part of the story. And that's what I was getting at. It may not tell you if the ingredients are authentic or whether you're getting the quality you paid for. So to us, when we started this company, we know that authenticity matters because it provides not just transparency, but trust. So a product can be technically compliant and it can still be diluted, or the ingredients were substituted or whatever, but it doesn't match what the label says. And that affects everything, right? From brand credibility to, in the case of supplements I was mentioning, efficacy. If you're taking that supplement for a purported therapeutic benefit and the active ingredient isn't there, or it's in there in much like lesser quantity than you expected, not only have you paid a lot of money for it, because we know supplements are expensive, but now it also has zero efficacy.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really next level when you start to think about, it's one thing to read the label, it's another thing to think even more deeply about it. And there's, as Sylvain says, and as you said, there's been multiple cases where, from supplements to olive oils to whatever. Now, if we think about the global supply chain, the global food supply chain particularly, it's very sophisticated. There's a lot of people work very, very hard to track all those items, not the least of which is for recalls. But is there something that makes it particularly vulnerable to adulteration and fraud? I know when I worked for big retailers, we had people on the ground inspecting plants and, watching things for bad things not to happen. But talk about your understanding of the global food chain, and are we better off or worse off, or is it so sophisticated it's a sophisticated level of organized crime that's doing this? Give us some context.
Well, you know what? It's unfortunately, adulteration has existed since the dawn of time. It's nothing new. Mm-hmm. I read somewhere that the first documented cases were ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and those are the first documented cases. So God only knows what the cavemen were
water
doing.
Into wine, right?
Yeah,
I thought exactly. I was getting water. Now I got wine. What happened there?
Exactly, and even olive oil back then, right?
Mm-hmm,
so.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID brought it to light, the issues with supply chain. I think that's when I think the common consumer, like the common man, when like this, there's something going on here, because we knew we couldn't get our hands on certain things. But COVID or not, COVID exacerbated the situation, but it's still ongoing today. The headwinds that affect supply chain, unfortunately, are never going to go away. And I don't want to sound super pessimistic, but, things like geopolitical instability, I'd love to tell you that I'm a dreamer, but I think there will always be war. There will always be conflict. And the minute there is something like that, the ingredients that you used to be able to get from that country suddenly are in short supply. Or climate change, whether people believe it exists or not. There are droughts, and then there's like severe like flooding, and whatever, all sorts of things that create shortages. And adulteration, food fraud, is an opportunistic crime. It's as simple as that. So when there's a demand goes up and supply is short, then that's when the fraudsters make hay. So,
it's funny because I don't think of it as opportunistic. And when I think of ORC, organized retail crime, I think of it as systematic. In other words, there's always people who are always trying to commit food fraud. And
I'd say, but the categories are opportunistic, right?
I see.
Where you're going to decide to weigh in, where you're going to go play.
Right.
It's again, economic pressures, if there's tariffs or inflation or all of those things, right? That all adds to it. And our supply chains have become more complex. There's globalization now. There's multiple borders that a product has to cross, and there's a whole bunch of hands on your products.
Or not cross. Do you start to think with all these tariffs? I hear there's a lot of where do you want the product to come from kind of things going on in the background. That's a little less, where it came from, I guess, matters in certain categories, but, a little bit less, like, doesn't matter so much in fish, but it may matter in olive oil where
olive oil, exactly,
Greek or Italian or wherever, right?
Yeah. That's the problem, is we can't get everything here. The same thing with juice is a big category for adulteration. So we don't, have a lot of orange groves here in Ontario.
What are those categories? We've mentioned a couple already in the pot. Olive oil. I think of honey as well. I've heard, I remember Sylvain, you and I were interviewing the guys from the Vancouver Honey Cooperative, and that was their biggest foot forward, and the biggest watch out was to make sure there wasn't like corn syrup poured in the cheap honey.
Yeah, rice syrup, corn syrup used instead of...
have I got that right? I even remember fish that, this looks like a sea bream, but it's actually some other fish mislabeled. Watch your sushi.
They can tell you anything that it is. It's hard, unless it's a piece of salmon. White fish looks like white fish, So definitely fish. Sylvain was saying at the top, meat, like the horse meat scandal, but it can be things like pork and products that are supposed to be halal or kosher.
Sure.
Like they're olive oil. It's not just olive oil, like many edible oils. Whatever becomes a hot commodity. So avocado oil is at high risk, and now sesame oil is another one that's at high risk.
So your job is you'll go to whomever, your clients, and you'll say, on a random basis, let's say if they've got an ongoing supply from different brands. I'm pretty sure the brands don't do this on purpose, but even in their supply chains, right? Because we're talking about, multiple interlocking supply chains. And talk about the difference between identity testing and authenticity testing. So it's clearly a branded version of olive oil, but is it the pure olive oil? And maybe even the brand maybe even doesn't know. Do you think the grocer's best practice or the brand best practice is to randomly test every order coming in? Like, what's the scale that's appropriate to watch out for this thing? We watch out for the big outbreaks, but on an ongoing basis, what's the right process for brands and retailers to think about this?
Well, that's a loaded question. You've got a lot of questions in that one question. And I'll start first with, I think, really important for people to realize that an identity test may not be enough. So, what is a regulatory requirement, as well as making sure that the product is safe for human consumption with the heavy metal and pesticide and all that kind of testing, an identity test is required. And so a lot of people think that they've done everything they need to do. They're checking all the boxes. But that minimum regulatory compliant identity test, there's a gap there. It will confirm that the ingredient you're expecting to find in the product is there. So if you're saying, I'm expecting to find olive oil, it will tell you it is olive oil. But it may not tell you that there's something else in there. That's the kicker. This is what we are trying to get the word out, because
that's a big issue.
Big issue. So it's a purity assessment you need. We called ourselves Purity IQ on purpose because purity is that missing link often. And I'm not saying that every identity test is incorrect. It depends on the technology the lab is using, which is again why I come back to the technology that we invested in, because this is all we do. Many labs have other technology that they need for all the other tests they're running. And oh, by the way, it happens to do identity testing, but it may not do purity testing, but they're still being able to check off the box. Mm. So the purity will tell you if the ingredient's been diluted. It'll tell you if there's anything else unexpected in there, so a substitution or an addition of something. And importantly, is that consistency across batch to batch. Because one-time test is just that. It's a one-time test. There's no guarantee that product will always be authentic. So that opens up the door to your next question, Michael, which is how often. And it really is. So you said something in the beginning. You go to your clients and you talk to them about whatever. We're first of all, we're not militant. We aren't going out and picking products and doing exposés.
Yeah, trying to help the industry. Yeah.
Well, we're working with those who want to work with us. Right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there are people who get it, and even those who come to us because there's a problem with the testing they're doing with another lab. They're getting inconclusives, or they're getting something that doesn't make sense. And again,
they want to test the testers.
Or they're getting, a result that is saying we can't figure it out. So they come to us again because of the technology we have. So, but once they see what else we offer, it's like, stay with us, because we can offer you a lot more. We can really delve into these things with you and do some projects. So, how often you test, it really depends on how many batches you do in a year. If you do a batch once a year, well, then you only need to test it that once a year. But if you're going to test, if you've got several batches, then yeah, absolutely, you should be testing them on a regular basis. And we have certification, and there are requirements to be certified with us. So that's the number one criteria for being certified, is that you're doing batch-to-batch consistency testing.
All right. I've been amazed with this food inflation issue the last few years. I was expecting food fraud or food authenticity to become a broader issue, but what we have heard from consumers are their concerns about shrinkflation, skimflation, obviously higher prices, of course, but I've seen there were lots of discussions about food fraud before COVID and a little after, but it kind of disappeared for some reason. I can't explain as to why. Do you think that has actually lessened the pressure on companies to be compliant and making sure that their suppliers are supplying what they're supposed to be supplying in the first place?
Well, there may be complacency, but I can tell you, and I've got a fact in front of me here, so I can give you the source too. But food fraud incidents increased 1,041% between 2020 and 2023.
In Canada?
That's a U.S. data.
U.S. Okay. I was going to say, if it's in Canada, wow, that's data I was not aware of. Wow.
Right. But there's still, we are seeing fraud. We aren't seeing it all the time. Again, because people are coming to us, and we're not going off and doing, random checks on the shelf, but we're finding things. There are fillers being used, especially in supplements. People are fillers that you expect to find in a supplement because it's part of the process, but in excessive amounts, what should be 5%, we've seen 95%.
Wow.
And it should be, so you only get 5% of the actual whatever, elderberry or ashwagandha or whatever it is, And again, this is coming to us because other technology
I'm
isn't.
not surprised at all, Deleo, because of the cost of inputs, I would expect some companies to look around and change their procurement strategy, and as a result, of course, the product itself, the nature of their product actually changes, and that's why I've always wondered, okay, so what is actually going on here the last 3-4 years, how things have gone with input costs and everything else. Do you think that really companies are absolutely taking food authenticity seriously enough, you think?
They think they are. I mean, that honestly, and I'm saying that without being facetious, again, because they're doing identity testing, they really are sleeping well at night thinking they've done everything they need to do.
Right.
That's the issue, really. At the end of the day, we're trying to get the message out that you may not be doing enough. Ask your labs what kind of technology they're using.
Are they using?
I'm going to explain a really quick concept because, again, as a layperson, this was something that blew me away when I realized that this existed. There's testing that is targeted and there's testing that is non-targeted. And these are English words. We all know what target and non-target means. But the implication is that most of the analytical methods, the technologies being used today to do identity testing are targeted. And that means you are targeting a specific thing. You're asking that technology to find X. So whatever it is, olive oil. And it will find the olive oil and say, yes, there's olive oil. And then that's it. Non-targeted will expose everything in a product. And in the case of NMR, it's targeted and non-targeted. It exposes everything at the molecular level. And so if you're going to be a company that is looking for adulteration and is about authenticity and combating food fraud.
In general, yeah.
In general, target.
Even if you're not looking for one specific thing, you could actually find it.
Well, and therefore, if we'd invested in targeted technology, it would be extremely inefficient for us because there's thousands of adulterants. We'd be going, is that there? No. What about that? No. What about this? No. I mean, it's a needle in a haystack. So ask your labs. You don't have to do business with Purity IQ. Ask your labs, are they using non-targeted technology? And then you know your identity. Sorry.
Before we go back to Michael for one last time, I just want to have one question. I mean, are we looking at food fraud like drugs at the Olympics? Are some companies getting so sophisticated that we really have to adapt the technology we use to test? Is that what's going on here?
Absolutely. You know what? The fraudsters have figured out what the shortcomings are. They understand. It doesn't take long. If there's a gap, they'll figure it out. So what I've just described about targeted versus non-targeted, if they know that you're using what the most common type of technology is targeted, then they know that as long as there's some of that product in there that you're expecting to find, it'll pass. Some technology isn't even, doesn't even quantify the amount.
Right.
So it might be 5%, not 100%. Right. So you need to know what questions to ask and not just take it at face value.
That is just such a great way to wrap the interview. You got to know the questions to ask. This has been fascinating. It's super interesting. Say, Sylvain, we've talked about food fraud and all this importantness in terms of the global supply chain. So, Deleo, you're really doing interesting work. Thanks so much for coming on and talking to Sylvain. And I know where can people get a hold of you or learn more about the company?
You scared the crap out of our listeners, but hey.
I would say the best place to go find out more about us and reach us is on our website. It's www, of course, purity-iq.com. It's that hyphen that gets us every time, but that's our name.
Purity-.com. I'll put that link in the show notes. So listen, once again, Deleo, I think we met at Seattle, you and I. So it's great to get you on the mic and talk about this important issue. And we wish you much continued detective work and success in the detective work and helping us all eat what we consume, what we think we're consuming. So thanks again for joining us on the pod.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. It's a great story to tell, and I'll
absolutely
shout it from the rooftops anytime.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, we're back. We get a couple of rapid-fire quick things. You sent me this note that the LA Rams football team, his owner now is the biggest and largest farm owner in the U.S. Is this the kind of thing where Robert Angelus-like character, where owns a lot of the farmland and leases it out to farmers? What's going on here?
That's pretty much it. So we have two countries with two farmland owners, huge farmland owners. So in the U.S., we have the LA Rams owner owning 2.7 million acres. That's the size of the Yellowstone Park.
Okay.
In Canada, we have Robert Angelich out of Regina. Mm-hmm. He owns 250,000 acres. Both of them. Neither of them are farmers.
Right.
Great for them. I mean, they're buying farmland. They're renting farmland out to farmers.
Renovating that farmland in some cases, right? Upgrading the farmland.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And frankly, I've spoken to some tenants of Robert, and they're all very happy. I mean, the problem with farmland that people may not understand or appreciate is that there's so much capital you can pour into your farm, and sometimes you run out, but you still want to scale up.
Right. It's
exactly.
Still full of rocks.
And you want capacity to optimize your land as much as possible. If you have the help of a guy like Robert Angelich, you're going to actually make it happen much, much faster than just waiting until you have the capital to buy your neighbor. So I think this is great. And apparently, according to the piece I read from NBC about the largest farmland owner in the U.S., is that more and more millionaires, more people are looking into farmland and buy farmland as well. And so that's going to increase the value of farmland, which I think is always a good thing. It's always a good thing because it raises the bar, it increases the value of farms, both in Canada and the U.S. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a bit of a I know a lot of people actually were poo-pooing on Bill Gates as a farmland owner. He doesn't own as much as many acres as he used to, by the way. He's not even in the top 10 in the U.S. anymore.
Let's talk about, by the way, fun factoid, our interview with Robert is still, after all these years, the number one listened to interview on our podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Exactly. Years. Season 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, long time ago. We should get him back on, actually, see what he's thinking lately.
I'm seeing in Regina in a couple of weeks.
Fantastic.
He's actually, fun fact for you, so he's the keynote in the morning for the conference called Convergence in Regina, and I'm the keynote right after lunch.
All right. Well, wrangle him. Get him on the pod. It was a great interview. I had no idea of all this stuff. So one of the things I love. Last couple of things. GFL, Green for Life, big environmental disposal company. They're now doing our curbside stuff. They're now structurally
compost
listing in Miami so they can get on the Dow. It feels like just a corporate thing, but
it's a corporate thing. Yeah, absolutely. They're not moving everyone. Yeah. They're just moving their headquarters. But I got to tell you, GFL is going to get some flack over this, and probably from your premier.
No doubt. Yeah.
I can't wait to see Premier Ford boycotting compost. I can tell you, there are a lot of headquarters located in Canada. There's nobody around.
Yeah.
All of the heads. All of the executives operate out of the U.S. So at least they were honest about that.
Berkshire Hathaway getting out of Heinz. There's some strong rumors that they're going to sell a long held position.
I think it's going to happen. Yeah.
You think it's going to happen, eh?
28%. So for people who may not remember, back in 2013, or I think it was 2012, they partnered with 3G Capital out of Brazil to buy 20% of Kraft Heinz and somewhat control the company a little bit, which led to the closure of the Leamington plant, by the way, because they were restructuring. It was all about cost costs.
Yeah.
And now what's really interesting many years later is that, well, we know that the CPG world is under tremendous pressure with the GLP-1s, with food economics, input costs, inflation. There's lots going on. There's the ultra-processed food campaign or the anti-ultra-processed food campaign happening. And so there's a lot going on. And Warren Buffett is probably thinking, you know what, this is just not good. We need to dump this. And so very interesting to see. I suspect there's going to be more movement. But when Warren Buffett moves, people pay attention. So that could actually bring a lot of funds, a lot of investors away from CPG, the CPG world, I would say.
Interesting. Well, let's end on something in the restaurant sector here in Canada. Olive Garden is back. They're bringing their bottomless bread basket of yummy, highly processed garlic bread. They're coming back. They're opening up. Now, my question to you
have you been to Olive Garden?
Yes, of course.
Willingly?
Is this the case? And we were talking about restaurants last episode where they're owned by Recipe, who's bringing them back, big conglomerate, who owns some of my favorite
two restaurants in Toronto and Ottawa, right?
I think so, yeah. And so is this now going to be an environment where only the big systems, the big networks like Recipe can expand, or is there still room for small, innovative players?
Well, they have an advantage. They have an advantage for sure. And so I'm not surprised. And of course, in our report claiming that the number of restaurants in Canada will drop by 4,000, of course, we are expecting some openings. But what's interesting is that they appear to be very careful. I mean, we're only talking about 2 restaurants here. Yeah. We're not talking about 10 or 20.
Very modest. Yep.
Yeah. So they're adopting a very incremental approach, which tells you that they're being careful. They're testing the waters essentially, and they can do that. Independents can't do that. If you're opening, you're opening. Right. You're committed. Yeah. But with Olive Garden and Recipe, I mean, you can try things here and there, see what happens, and spend a couple of millions, maybe 5 million to open up a restaurant and see how it goes. Really, I'm
a little bit always baffled by the strategy, and I'm similarly baffled. You know, when people say I'm going to reopen Zellers or reopen consumers distributors. I mean, there's almost no real consumers of any spending power that even remember those brands. So I'm you know, who has been sitting around pining, God, I wish they'd open up an Olive Garden again. Like, you know, just, you know, God bless them for
those
trying.
Those breadsticks, man.
You know, why? It's just interesting to me, and maybe we can get them on the pod sometime and just get into that aspect, because I got to think you could open up a restaurant, you know, Sylvain and Mike's with the equal amount of power as Olive Garden. Like, who remembers Olive Garden positively, whether you remember it alone? So anyway, I think that's a fascinating question that the brand guys can answer. Maybe we'll get, as I said, maybe we get lucky and we'll get somebody from Recipe. We've asked several times.
Well, we're going to be meeting at the RC show in a couple of months. So obviously we'll be shopping around for guests for sure.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, let's leave it there. Long episode, but lots going on and lots of interesting stuff to talk about. Let's leave it there for now. I'm Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels, everyone.
Take care.